I'm not going to say that I've never had issues with sort of being career limiting issues with people that I've worked with, where it's like the men maybe get promoted before the women. I've seen that. I fight against it every day. I want people to be promoted for who they are and what they bring to the table and how they can contribute to the company. But I think we still live in a world where that is a real thing, that women, you don't see as many women executives around the table. And sometimes women's voices can get lost in that room of all men.
Welcome to the She's So Sweet podcast, where we interview accomplished women who have worked their way to the C-suite. I'm your host, Kristi Faltorusso, Chief Customer Officer and award-winning customer success executive. I am so thrilled to introduce today's guest and, ironically, one of my customers, Maria Burch, Chief Customer Officer at Trustwell. Maria, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Kristi. I'm so excited to be here.
I am so excited. Now, Maria, can we let them in on our little secret for today?
Yes, we should.
This is Maria's first podcast. So I have the privilege of having her first ever recorded episode. I'm so excited for that.
Thank you so much, Kristi, and thank you for putting me at ease. I am excited for the podcast and hope your listeners are kind.
They are, and they're going to be hanging on your every word because honestly, I've previewed your story. Obviously, we've had a chance to get to know each other and work together, and I'm really excited for you to have the opportunity to share your journey with our listeners because I think it's a really compelling one.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Before we get into you sharing your story and your journey with our listeners, let's start by telling them a little bit more about your role at Trustwell, because I know as the Chief Customer Officer, you oversee a lot there. So tell us, what is Trustwell and what do you oversee there?
Absolutely. Thank you. Trustwell is a SaaS-based software in the food industry. So what we do is help connect the dots between our products and the data so that our customers can have more control over their food supply. Our goal is to make the food supply chain more transparent, ensure that people feel really good about what's going into their bodies. They understand what is the nutritional aspects of that, as well as where did it come from, helping our companies be able to trace the entire chain from the time it's grown all the way through when it's distributed to their customers.
That's so important, right? So I think what you guys are doing is like huge, especially as I've seen ingredients in foods change and evolve over the years, which is crazy. So I love what you guys are doing.
Absolutely. And one of the reasons I joined Trustwell was that I actually have a food allergy. And to me, passion meets purpose. So I love helping customers and having the ability to actually help and impact in a world where I know how hard it is as a person with a food allergy, let alone if you're a parent that has a child with a food allergy. Right. So really making that safer for everybody is our goal and our mission, and it's easy to come to work every day.
I love that. I love that so much. Well, listen, I know you and I share a similar role, and you're the chief customer over there. So tell us what that looks like, because we also know just because you have the same title does not mean your role looks or feels the same in any business. So tell me more about what you do there as the chief customer officer at Trustwell.
Sure. So my role really is to work with the customer from their entire life cycle post-sale. So I have our customer success team. We have customer success managers that manage our enterprise customers and are working very closely with them to make sure that they fully utilize our system, continue to grow with our system as their business needs change, that we're ensuring that we're pivoting to those to help with that. I also have our implementation and training teams. That's a very important aspect of it. We work with really large companies down to smaller companies. We need to tailor the way we're training and helping with process improvement and changes internally. So I have a really great team that handles that. I also manage our account management team, which is working with all renewals and upsells for our entire customer base. And then I lead our operations team, which is all of our support team, supporting all of our customers on a day-to-day basis, making sure that when they need something, we're responding very quickly. So I definitely have
You're definitely keeping busy there, Maria.
Yes, I have great leaders under me that help support me, and I'm very, very thankful for the team I have.
I love that. Well, this is, again, a great example. Like, no two roles look the same. We've had a couple other chief customer officers on the show, and everyone's remit really looks different. And so I love to see kind of what your overarching purview looks like there and all the different parts of the business that you get to impact. Now, I have to guess, and I always say this, but like, I hate to make assumptions, but I'm going to assume that when you were a little girl, a little Maria, she did not want to grow up and be a chief customer officer. Did she?
Well, no, because chief customer officer didn't even exist.
Exactly.
I'm going to date myself.
So tell me, so before your grand dreams of running a post-sales organization, what did you want to be when you grew up?
When I was a little girl, I thought I want to be a teacher. Teacher was where I was going. And then when I got into high school, I wanted to be a lawyer because I was like, I don't know if teaching, I thought I could be a college professor maybe, but then I was like, I don't know if that's enough. So I want to be a lawyer. And now I'm a chief customer officer. Maybe you think those are very different, but the way I look at it is I'm helping customers every day. We have to use persuasion. We have to use communication. My training and implementation team is teaching customers every day. My customer success managers are teaching customers every day. And I get to help teach my employees, help them grow. So as much as it's a completely different career path that I ended up in, I think some pieces of the law and or teaching are still kind of embodied in what I do every day.
So I love that. And I think we've had some guests here that do a great job of kind of taking the what they wanted to do and helping understand what pieces of that they actually get to do in their day-to-day today. But tell me about that journey. So you had a thought about being a teacher. What was that evolution look like? So how did you get from A to here?
That's a really great question. I think by the time I went to college, I knew I wasn't going to go for teaching anymore. So I studied communication and media studies at Canisius University. And I really thought my next step will be law school. I worked for a lawyer and actually decided it wasn't what I wanted to do. And I wasn't really wanting to go on to get my master's or anything at that time. So I actually ended up in sales because I think that's where a lot of people end up when they're like, I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to do with my degree.
Right.
And luckily enough that throughout my career working in sales and in staffing, so I was doing accounting and finance staffing, I happened to work with somebody that said, my sister is recruiting for a startup in the Raleigh-Durham area that has this thing called customer success. This was a very long time ago. It actually wasn't even the title of the role, but it is essentially what we know of customer success today. And when she did that, I thought, interesting. So I could work with people that have already said yes and just get them to say yes a little more and get them to love the products and get them to understand, I can do this. And I fell into the role and I remember thinking, this is terrible. I don't know technology. This is not my background. And one day I was talking to a customer and I had this aha moment of like, this is what I was meant to do. Mm-hmm. And here we are 14 years later, I'm still in the industry. I feel like I grew up with customer success, right? As customer success evolved, my career has evolved. And so it's been an interesting journey for sure.
I love that. It's always interesting to hear everyone's kind of pathway into customer success because to your point, it's not sales, it's not marketing, it's not finance, it's not one of these things. It's been around for forever, for as long as we can remember. It is newer. And there's been so much of an evolution over the past couple of years. And so being able to be a part of that journey and watch it develop and reframe itself over the years. I mean, it's been an incredible ride. And I know that you and I share a similar kind of trajectory in that process. So I love that. Is there anything looking back that you're like, man, I wish I would have done something different? Is there any other career path you would have wanted to explore if you had to look back?
As I've gotten older, I've thought maybe I shouldn't have sold myself short on the law. And I've often thought, should I consider that in my early 30s? I thought maybe I'll go back and maybe I will try to pursue that. But at the end of the day, I'm like, but when I go to bed every night, I still feel really confident in what I do. And I really, really like helping people. And so I found a path to do that in, and I feel fulfilled every day. So no, I don't think now I'm ready for any other career. I actually feel really good in this one.
Good. Well, you know what? There's always that like bring these worlds together even more and go work for like a law tech product, legal tech. And then you can have the best of both worlds, maybe. All right. Well, listen, I know that you had to have a lot of moves and changes because obviously you don't get from where you were in sales to chief customer officer. So when you think back and you're reflecting on your career, what were some of those pivotal moments for you? Or what were some of those major decisions that you feel like really contributed to your ascent to the C-suite?
That's a great question. And I think for me, when I think about it, the biggest takeaway that I would tell other people is that I was willing to say yes to things that felt extremely uncomfortable. Just like this podcast today, right? First time. But I was willing to say yes to those things as an individual contributor. A manager would come to me and say, do you think you could take on this really difficult client? Or do you think you could put together this really complex thing? And I remember oftentimes sitting at my desk thinking, I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm going to figure it out. And that determination of I'm going to figure it out. And I'm willing to raise my hand and say yes to things that feel maybe a little bit above what I can do today, and not letting that imposter syndrome catch up with me. I'm not going to say I've been perfect in that. There's times where I'm phoning a friend saying, please tell me if this is going to be okay, right? And I've had a lot of people that have believed in me along the way, but it really is around raising your hand for things. And when my first job, as a VP of customer success, I remember thinking, am I really ready for this? And the director that I'd been working for at the time, he said, you're ready. I know you don't feel like you're ready, but you're ready. You're ready for this role. It's time to step out of here. I'd been there for 5 years. I'd really helped grow their department. We had 85 people in our customer success and operations department at that time. And everyone except for one of them I had interviewed and helped their career start. And when he said, you're ready, you got to take this job, I thought, I'm going to do it. And I still keep in touch with him today. And he still reminds me that I'm ready.
I love that, because you were, obviously. Look where you are now.
Exactly.
So tell me about that journey kind of into that first VP role, because
Sure.
that, I feel like when you hit VP, I think that's the first leadership role that feels so significantly different than a team lead, a manager, a director, right? Like, I feel like VP and above, there really are those like two tranches of leadership roles in your career. So what were some of the things as like your first time VP? What were those experiences like for you? Like, what are some of those memorable learnings that you took away?
That's a great question. I think for me, one of the biggest things is I'd always heard it's lonely at the top, right? And I thought this was the first time I'm looking around and there's no one else doing my job, right? There's no one. The CEO is like, I don't know customer success. I hired you because you know that. He said, right? So I started at a company called Teamworks. It's another SaaS platform in the Raleigh-Durham area, and they work with sports teams. So I like sports. I knew I liked sports, and I could understand that. And I really had to understand their product. But what they do is they empower athletes. So it really is an operational platform that empowers athletes. And so that was a little bit of like, I understand the world. I like it. It's fun, but it's hard work. It's really hard work when the fun stuff of like going out and meeting these athletes or going to college campuses and seeing their programs, that's the fun. But when you're sitting in your office going, I have to present to the board tomorrow and I've never done this before. How am I going to present to the board, right? And there was someone at that company. He was the VP of finance. I remember one night he came by my office and he said, I think it's kind of late. Like, why are you still here? And I said, I'm working on this budget and like, I'm trying to put all these numbers together and I'm not 100% accurate in these things. And I just don't feel right. And he said, we're all making it up a little bit. You don't have all the answers. That's why we put budgets together and then we monitor those. You don't have all the answers. And I thought, wow, how empowering is that for another leader to say, it's okay. You don't have all the answers. You do the best you can and you have to take some guesses. And so I don't think before that point, I fully understood that leaders in a lot of ways are making decisions we don't have all the facts right. We're predicting the future, right? And you can't really predict the future.
100%. I think that is a really strong moment for any leader to get to that place where they understand that like, you're not making this up by yourself either. Everyone is having to do the same thing. Right. Nobody knows this. So it's not just that you don't know it, nobody does. I have to spend a couple minutes on something that you hit on because I think this is really important because don't forget, a lot of our listeners are aspiring leaders that have grand dreams of being in roles like you are in. Talk to me about your first board meeting ever.
Oh goodness, my first
I know.
meeting,
like we'll take a deep breath. We don't want the nausea to come back up because I don't know about you, but mine was like, horrible. Tell me about your first board.
Absolutely. That's a great point, Natasha. I tell people I am not joking when I say this, and I still do this before every board meeting. Now I usually travel when I'm meeting the board instead of them coming to us because we don't have an office here. And I stand in my hotel room in front of the mirror and I do the Superwoman thing. I did it before that first board meeting. I do it before every board meeting. It makes me feel a little bit more confident and walk a little taller.
I love that.
But the day before my first board meeting, I did not sleep much the night before. I was so nervous. I thought, what if they ask me a question that I don't know? And then I kept reminding myself, but the board's not going to know the answer either, right? Like it's going to be okay here because they're not in the business, right? They understand the business, but they're not in the day-to-day. So it's going to be okay. But I didn't sleep. But then I had to tell myself, don't drink too much caffeine. If you drink too much caffeine, you're going to be like crazy person at the board meeting. So it's kind of like going back and forth between the two. And then I'm going to share this, kind of probably embarrassing, but I've told other people this in presentations. Then you start sweating.
Oh yeah.
Like, oh gosh, I'm wearing my jacket can't take my jacket off. Like it's gonna. Like I remember the first board meeting just being terrifying. I don't feel that way anymore, but I still do my Superwoman pose because I think it's part of the process now when I'm talking to the board of like just making sure I'm confident before I walk in the room.
I love that. Well, this is also a very big reason why I only wear black. People don't ever see me in color. So I'm like, the minute I get nervous, I'm like just drippy. It's horrible. All right.
Absolutely.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that with us and being a little vulnerable because so many folks haven't had to present to a board yet, right? Like as they're building their careers and they're aspiring to be in these leadership roles, they haven't had that privilege yet of being able to represent their business and do all of that work. So I think it's always great to hear just what are some of those firsts. But I'm also confident that rising to your role didn't come without some challenges and perhaps some battle scars along the way. So what were some of those significant challenges or obstacles that you faced? Like, what were some of those real hardships that you had to kind of like pivot and work through and kind of feel like you came out on the other side and you're okay, but in it was tough?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. And another vulnerable moment for me, I think being a female rising in the tech world, that is a hard thing. You are often sitting in a room full of other males. And how do you have a voice in those rooms? And how do you feel confident and not get talked over? Luckily, I grew up in a really big family. So I did learn how to use my voice at a young age. But in that, I think that's probably one of the biggest things is now being able to confidently go into a room of executives, regardless of the makeup, and just feel like an equal instead of feeling like maybe a little like, oh, I'm not one of the boys club, right? I'm not going to say that I've never had issues with sort of being career limiting issues with people that I've worked with where it's like the men maybe get promoted before the women. I've seen that. I fight against it every day. I want people to be promoted for who they are and what they bring to the table and how they can contribute to the company. But I think we still live in a world where that is a real thing, that women, you don't see as many women executives around the table. And sometimes women's voices can get lost in that room of all men. So I would say those are some of the biggest battle scars where I had to remind myself that I do know what I'm talking about. I do understand this world. And I do have something to contribute and say to the conversation and make sure that I'm consistently, raising my side of the conversation and where I'm coming from. And sometimes it's a really good thing because you're bringing up ideas that maybe other people hadn't thought of.
I love that. And this is not an uncommon challenge that I think a lot of folks are faced with. And even at different levels of leadership, right? Or even as an individual contributor, a lot of women sometimes will find themselves in a room full of men, right? And it can be intimidating, it can be overwhelming. Share with us, like, how did you navigate that for the first time? So think about like back to one of your first leadership meetings, you're in a room, maybe there's you, maybe there's another female. How did you feel? How did you start to feel confident enough to use your voice? How did you also know when it wasn't necessary to talk, but you're still there and your presence and you're contributing? Like, how did you navigate all that? Because those firsts, I think, are really important.
Absolutely. That's a great question. And I'd love to say I did it all right. I don't think I did. I'm not.
None of us did. It's okay.
There may have been tears. There may have been tears once or twice. I don't love tears at work, but they happen. But I think the way I really learned how to do that is by speaking to people as people instead of kind of looking at it like, ooh, maybe I don't know as much as this other person, or maybe my voice isn't as important as this other person, speaking as coming from the seat I sit in, what I see every day. I speak a lot from the customer voice. So I use a lot of our NPS surveys, Net Promoter Score, if you're not familiar with that. I know you are, Kristi, but listeners, or the feedback we get from our support surveys, those types of things. I use a lot of that when speaking in these executive meetings to say, based on what the customers are saying, based on what I'm seeing, working with my team, I'm in the trenches a lot with the team, based on what the team is seeing and hearing, this is what's happening. And I do find that coming at it with some of that data and kind of concrete things really helps to shape that conversation, be more confident in the conversation. If I have data in front of me, I feel a lot, I would say fearless is a great word. I have the data. It's really hard to argue with that. Right. And so I've done a lot of training my leaders. When you're bringing a problem to me, let's talk in context of how much revenue is this impacting? How many customers is this impacting? Because if you're raising everything sort of as like a red flag of this is happening, if everything's important, nothing's important. So how do we boil that down and make those best decisions that we can? I wouldn't say that I figured it all out. I think I'm in a really good spot now, and I can definitely balance those relationships and I don't have any anxiety around conversations, whether I'm with all male, all female. It doesn't matter to me, but I definitely think in the beginning I had to figure that out a little bit. And I learned through trial and error, right? There were times when I was like, that did not go as planned. The best thing you can do is journal, right? Go home, write in your journal. What did you do wrong? What do you hope you never do again, right? And just really reflect on that. As hard as that is, reflecting on what you could change is how I've kind of evolved the way that I approach things.
I love that. What great practical advice for folks. And I know a lot of people, like, journaling is big now. So I know a lot of people are doing that. So it's important to be able to use that in the context of what's happening professionally too. I think a lot of times we want to use those personal kind of activities just to document what's happening to us personally sometimes, but it could be a great learning device to help us professionally, right? If you're capturing those moments and those stories to learn from. The She's So Sweet podcast is brought to you by Client Success. Client Success is an all-in-one customer success platform to help post-sale implementation and success teams manage customers from new to renew. Through an industry-leading platform approach, Client Success gives businesses an in-depth view into customer health, product usage trends, along with churn and risk data so that your team can not only retain customers, but help them grow as well. Whether it's managing customer onboarding workflows in shared portals, building custom health scores, tracking sentiment with NPS surveys, or doing more with less through AI and automations, Client Success gives customer success professionals a true one-stop platform to manage all aspects of the customer journey. To learn more about the industry's fastest to implement customer success platform, visit www.clientsuccess.com. That's Client Success. Simple, powerful customer success. Okay. Well, as much as I could probably sit here and share a billion stories back with you about all of my failures and things like that, let's spend some time talking about successes. Because I always say, especially as women, we don't spend enough time reflecting back on all the great contributions that we've made to businesses, to people, to our own professional careers. And so I need us to take off our humble hats for a moment, and I need you to brag. So as you think back on your years in your career, what were some of your proudest moments? What were some of your biggest accomplishments that you can reflect back on and be like, yeah, I did that?
That's a really good question. I think there's a multitude of them. The first one that kind of pops out in my head, before I was ever a VP, I went into a company and I built a customer success department for them as a manager. But I had 14 of the largest flooring distributors, and they all paid the company a lot of money to build pieces of their product for them, but they could not agree on what to build. And I put together a process and managed meetings on a biweekly basis of here is what you have to do. And I'm talking to executives in this company saying, you have 2 weeks to make a decision. Here's all the data you need. We're making a decision. We're moving forward. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And really figuring out a way to kind of help control that conversation, because in a room full of 14, and I'm going to say they were all male executives for these flooring companies, they couldn't agree upon anything, yet they'd all spent this money. So we needed to build something. We need to be able to recognize the revenue. So that was probably my first defining, I can do this. And then, as my career has evolved, some of my greatest accomplishments have been leaders asking me to come back and work for them. So I've went places and maybe they've left, or the company, in the startup world, sometimes the company does layoffs, that sort of thing, and the leaders are gone. And then they go somewhere else and they're growing their career somewhere else, and they tap you on the shoulder and say, hey, come work for me again. And so my last couple of roles, I've actually went from, a company to a different company by getting recruited by someone that I used to work for. Our current CEO, she's amazing, Katie Jones. She used to work with me at Food Logic a few years ago, and I went somewhere else. That company got bought out. We became Trustwell. She was promoted to CEO earlier this year, and she tapped me on the shoulder and she said, I need you. You've got to come help us help our customers. And I thought, you've inspired me a lot, and I want to come work here again. So that felt amazing. And so that to me is, I look at that and say, I'm clearly doing something right if people are tapping you on the shoulder to come work with them again.
And I think there's more to it than just the impact you have on the business, because to bring people back like that, it's a huge testament to your culture, to your leadership style, right? Because as a leader, right, we impact people, probably more than we impact the business. And so to bring somebody back, it's not just about the work that you did, it's how you inspire people, right? It's how you lead teams. And so I would absolutely say that probably would be your number one. Like it's a huge a huge testament to you. So wow, that is awesome. And that happened more than once?
Yes. So that happened in my last 2 roles. And then it happened 2 roles before that. So my first VP role, I didn't know anybody. My second VP role, I didn't know anybody, but kind of like the beginning of my career, or earlier in my career, and then later in my career, it's happened. So yes, it's been awesome. And it's been other female leaders that I've worked with that have said, I see you and I want you to come work for me again. And
I love that.
Yeah, let's do this. And so women empowering women, right? Like we think about that all the time, and hopefully everyone thinks about that. But I think it's a true testament of when that happens, great things can happen.
I love that so much.
I will say when I came back to this role, more than half of the company was new, because these were 2 companies that they combined together to form Trustwell. But the people that used to work for me, they all reached out and were like, we're so happy you're back. I cannot wait to see you again. I'm so glad you're going to work with me again. And that felt really great. That does feel, it will feel great to anybody, but just to have my employees reaching out to me saying, I'm so excited. I can't wait until, next Wednesday. I'm going to reach out to you as soon as you're here. It was amazing.
That's awesome. That's really great. I feel like I've not taken advantage of those opportunities just because I'm always like, I want to work under new leaders and try new things. But that's like I said, huge testament to you, Maria, and like all the work that you've done and the people that you've inspired to be able to tell that story multiple times. Like that's huge. So good for you. Now, you obviously just talked about empowering women, which leads me into my next question that I'm going to have for you, because I too agree. I love the saying, empowered women empower women. And I really love to hear what other folks are doing to help the future female leaders, especially in our industry of tech, right? Where we know that it is primarily male and we need to help amplify the voices and give new opportunities to folks. So I'd love to hear what you do kind of in your day-to-day, personally, professionally, to help empower other women.
Sure, absolutely. And I've done a few different things throughout my career. I used to be part of the women leadership in, the women's leadership in technology in the RTP area. That group doesn't exist anymore, but when they did, that was a huge one for me, because I thought, how can I help other people find their voice? In my last role, I did a lot of mentoring, and I'm just getting my feet under me. I've been here about 4 months now, so hopefully I'll be able to start having some opportunities to do some mentoring again, because my greatest feel good for myself is when I see someone else succeed. So seeing someone that started, maybe as a customer success manager, and next thing you know, they're a VP somewhere, right? And you're like, I had an impact early on in their career and I helped them find their own voice. And I have a lot of those throughout my career. I've been lucky enough to work with some really great people that have grown their careers, and that's been amazing. Right now, I have multiple female leaders that work under me, and I really I hate the word under me. I don't know why I said that, but multiple female leaders that work with me, and they're on my team, and I'm constantly trying to amplify their voice. So they'll bring something to me, and instead of me just handling it for them, I'm like, let me help you handle the situation. Let me help you. We can role play. How would you talk to somebody? How are you going to approach this? And really figuring out a way to have that help them have that conversation, because there's no better way for them to learn than kind of be put in the fire. But if they can be put in the fire in a safe environment where they've already felt like they've done some role playing and they can feel confident going into that meeting, it builds their confidence for the next time. And a couple of years ago, I remember a manager came to me and she was asking me something like that. I was like, maybe like, can I move my team meeting to a different day? And I was like, are you asking my permission? And she said, well, the person I used to work for wanted me to get permission for these different things. And I said, I'm telling you right now, you are the manager of the customer success team. You own that team. If you need my help, if you want my advice on things, come to me. But like, I don't want to give you permission to do things like that. You know what's best for your team. And I think sometimes people just need to feel empowered. I think she had grown up at work in a different culture. And when I took on managing that group, I didn't realize that until that question happened. And then it was like, okay, I need to empower these team members to be able to do these things themselves.
I love that. And that's, we hear a lot of, though, sadly, you've got a lot of first-time leaders who are not being trained on how to be leaders and what leadership looks like. And so you fall into situations where you might have behaviors like that, right? Where you think that leading is micromanaging and telling people what to do. So I'm glad that you were able to empower her and like give her a voice and
Yes.
opportunity to do that work. Now, you're obviously, how big is your team now, Maria? Because if I recall, it's fairly large.
Yeah, so I have about 40 people.
Yeah, so it's decent size. How many females do you have roughly?
So it's probably 50-50, honestly.
Okay. Well, I love that for us. That's great.
Which is great. Yeah, it's awesome. It's awesome. Maybe even a little more like 60-40 female. We have a lot of female. In my leadership team, I have I have 4 women and 1 gentleman. So, which is quite amazing. I stepped into that, right? I didn't hire all those people. I stepped into that, managing that group, but it's amazing to see. I think our company, even our executive team, is made up of half females and half males, which is awesome, right? Like we have really great conversations. We get along. We have a really very respectful culture, and it was amazing to step into. I can't take credit for it. I didn't build it, but it's a testament.
Well, you'll keep nurturing it, and it will keep growing under your leadership. I ask because I have a very specific question here, because the challenges that I had as a female leader, and like I'm in my mid-40s now, so I didn't see female leaders in positions growing up professionally. You didn't see a lot of them, maybe director level. But now you're having an experience now where you're leading probably a lot of like, earlier professional females on your teams and in your organizations. What are some of the common challenges that you're hearing or seeing for women now?
That's a great question. And I'll let you in on a secret. I'm in my mid-40s.
Yes.
So I think we dealt with the same thing, right? Like
I don't like to make assumptions on how old anybody is. You know what? We look great for our age, by the way. So if no one's watching this and you're just listening, we are stunning mid-40-year-old women. I just have to say.
Absolutely. I love it. Yes, I agree.
All right. So tell me, because I'd love to just hear kind of what are the newer challenges that are being, faced?
I think, some of the challenges are still the same. I hate to say that sounds terrible, but like balancing their life, and how do you balance? I have children. I have all of these other things, and still helping them figure out how to balance it. The difference I feel like for me versus them is that I'm right there going, hey, your child is sick. You need to take off. Go to the doctor. Your husband doesn't need to go to the emergency room. You can go to empowering them to do that. I didn't have that, right? Like it was different when we were kind of coming up through the ranks, but I think that's helpful for them. Women are still dealing with how do I make sure I show up in a way that I earn respect and people hear me, but they're not saying, oh, she's mean, or, oh, she's, a jerk, or any of the other words that you could use for that, and helping them go, hey, stand on your own, be professional. You can be kind, you can show empathy, but you've got to stand firm. And helping them figure out how to stand firm, I think that's probably one of the biggest takeaways that I have with my team, is helping them be able to have difficult conversations where they're not coming away beating themselves up over it. Like you don't need to apologize for having to have a very direct conversation. That is like you're helping that person by having that conversation, but all too often it's in this apologetic way. And I don't want my leaders to feel like they need, or any women on my team to feel like they need to apologize when they're giving feedback that's warranted or having a conversation that needs to happen. As long as you're doing it in a respectful way, providing empathy, seeking to understand, all of those things.
I love that. That's such great advice. It's interesting to see how challenges have evolved over the years and like what women are faced with. And so it's interesting to get your perspective on that, especially as you're leading a team as large as yours. Now let's talk about you. So I'm interested. Now, we've had a lot of debates about this on this podcast specifically. And so I've got a lot of leaders that have very strong points of view on here. But when you think about balancing your professional and personal life, especially as a C-suite executive in a startup environment, which we know is like 18 layers deep of like, how do I do all this? How are you creating the appropriate balance in your world to make sure that you're making time for yourself, for your family, for your friends, for your hobbies, and then also feeling like you're showing up as the best version of you in work?
Absolutely. I think that's a great question. And oftentimes we don't have all the answers. I think I have luckily learned a lot about myself and a lot about how I react, my mental state, all of those things to different situations. And for me, I call it work-life integration, not work-life balance. I can't actually take credit for it. Years ago, early on in my first manager role, I remember being in a training with our training and development person, and he said, we're not going to talk about work-life balance. It's not a real thing, but I think work-life integration is what we should all strive for. And so
I like it.
I've taken that with me for the last 10 years of my career. It's been in the back of my mind. And how do you sort of that it ebbs and flows, right? There are times when my family does not get a lot of me because there's a board meeting coming up or there's a crisis happening at work. Mm-hmm. But then there's other times where I have to step back and hold boundaries of like, I need to take this vacation. I need to be there. I need to take off at 2:00 tomorrow because there's a graduation, those types of things. I also get up and I work out as much as I can. I don't want to say every day. I'm not perfect, right? But I don't just, people are like, oh, do you do that just, you do that to look good. Everyone wants to look good, right? But that's not why I do it. I do it because I know for me, it helps me manage my emotions. It helps me manage my stress. Yep. It helps me take a deep breath when things don't feel like they're going the way they do. That whole, you want to respond, not react to things, those kinds of things. Working out is has been that key pillar for me that has helped with that. I do a lot of journaling. I do some meditation. That's to help me kind of sleep at night. If I don't do those things, sometimes all the things that I didn't get put down on paper or handle that day, they're running through my mind at 3 a.m.
Yeah, you're smart to do that. Now, listen, anybody who knows me knows that I am super into fitness myself. I love it. I truly believe in the same thing, right? Like I need it. My physical activity is as much mental as it is physical for me. I need it. Absolutely. It's my only alone time. It's no phone, no devices, no people bothering me. I do it at 5 a.m. in the morning to really ensure that nobody bothers me. And I'd love to hear, what is your fitness activity of choice? Are you a runner? Do you lift weights? Do you do classes? What's your thing?
That's a great question. I've bounced around to different things, but over the last year, I have found Orange Theory. If you're not, maybe people are familiar with Orange Theory, where it's 30 minutes kind of the cardio treadmill, and then your 30 minutes of weights. And the one thing it does is they do not allow phones in the studio. So it forces me to because it's at 6:00 in the morning, it forces me to really put my phone away and not touch it because, perfect. Well, we did talk about this. I forgot. I'm so sorry. Yes. So Orange Theory that is my workout of choice. And it's not just the workout, it's the community. Mm-hmm. I've heard people say there's 20 other people and you're competing against them. I'm like, I'm not competing against them. They're cheering me on. Right. They're like, yes, you had a great day. Like there are other people in there. My classes are mostly women. There are some gentlemen in there as well, but they're cheering you on. They're like, oh my gosh, you're running faster than you've ever ran, or you're lifting 5 more pounds than you usually lift. And it feels empowering. Yeah. And it's at 6 a.m. So it gets out of the way. It's done for the day. You can go about your day. But yeah, that's my workout of choice right now. I'm not saying I'll never switch it. But right now I feel like it is my community before I start my community at work.
It's so true, honestly, for all those reasons. So nobody saw, if you weren't watching and you're just listening along, I have an Orange Theory, like a squishy thing. It's like a stress ball-y type of thing, or maybe it's just like a squishy at my desk, because I've been doing Orange Theory for 7 years now. I actually just recently, as recent as this week, I'm taking a month off to actually just focus on strength building. And so I'm just doing like weightlifting and stuff like that, but I'm doing it with one of my Orange Theory besties. So to your point about community and friendship and camaraderie, like Orange Theory has allowed me to make some of my closest friends. And in fact, my best friend right now, which is probably hard to make friends as adult women or just adults in general. It's hard to make new friends. And so we've just taken a step back. We're going to do some weight training, but I love that you are also an Orange Theory enthusiast.
Absolutely. Thank you. Yeah. I can't say enough good things about it right now. That's where I'm at in my life. Same. But I, you know what? Great for you for saying I need to do something different for a little bit.
Yeah. 7 years is a long time at Orange Theory. I think it's outside of my marriage. It's my longest committed relationship. So
that's a long one. I'm 1 year.
I'm still going to go on Sundays and do my tread 50s and things like that. But I need to just I want to focus on building some strength right now. All right. Well, listen, I want to get to a few more things before we have to conclude our episode today, but this has been so great so far. So I want to just talk a little bit about kind of your thoughts on how you continue to grow and evolve as a leader, because I think this is so important. Nobody's ever done learning. It doesn't matter what title you get to. It doesn't, like, all those things don't matter. Great leaders, they have a learning mindset. And so when you think about yourself and the investments you make into Maria, what are the things that you do to make sure that you are continuously learning and growing and becoming a better version of yourself professionally?
Absolutely. That's a great question. I think also agree. So super important. I read a lot. I will say, some people are like, oh, read. I don't listen to books. I cannot do that. Like I find myself being like butterfly and like I've missed the whole episode. Right. And so I just, if you didn't see my look, it was, because if you're only listening to this podcast, I basically said, my mind wanders. And then I've realized I missed like a chapter of the book and then I have to start over. So I do a lot of reading. And I think that that's really important. I'm lucky enough to have a great group of professional friends that we can talk about books. So we read them, we talk about them. Just this past week in conversations with different people within my company, they've mentioned books and I'm running back to my bookshelf going, oh, I've got that one. Yeah, you should read that one. And so we've started a book club at work where we're reading a professional book like every other month. So that's been great. For me, I also have a really, like I mentioned, a great group of friends that are in leadership roles. And I tend to bounce ideas off of other people or ask for advice because I don't have all the answers. And sometimes I'm coming up against something that I haven't seen before. And I think the best way is to learn from someone else that's done it or has had an experience. I'd rather not have to make all the same mistakes they made, right? Like if I could start, 50% of the way of a good idea. So that's a big one for me. And I'm I do listen to podcasts. I love podcasts. So I don't listen to books, but podcasts, they're telling stories. Yeah. That's a really good one. And, I watch webinars, that sort of thing. I'm always like, even if it's something that I've heard before, a customer success webinar, like they maybe don't have different ideas than I've learned in the past. There's those moments of like, oh yes, we used to do that. Why did we stop doing that? Or we should try doing this with customers. It makes you kind of think about things differently, even though you've heard it before. Maybe you're not applying it today.
Yeah. I think there's a lot to be said for that because I hear folks that are like, oh, I'm not going to attend that topic because I already know or I've already done it. But honestly, sometimes it reinforces ideas that you had, which sometimes that validation is really good. It'll help motivate you to go and try and do something. Mm-hmm. But also there's more than one way to do things. And just hearing a different perspective on stuff, I think is so important. So unlike you, I try to absorb as much content as I can out there just to continue to hone our craft, right? And try new things and take what I can, bits and pieces. You don't need an hour's worth of value. Sometimes 1 minute, if you hear something that's compelling enough, it'll drive change or something different that you'll do in your career or, obviously for the organizations that you're running. So I love that. Okay. Now I got to dive into just one more thing about your career, because I'm very interested. When you think about the future, because we already had this evolution from teacher to lawyer to now chief customer officer. What does your future look like as you think about this? Because I feel like, yes, I love that we all live in the present. We're all very happy in our careers. Everyone loves their teams and their companies. But I know nobody gets to the C-suite without having like big aspirations for themselves, right? We are driven professionals who want to continue to better ourselves and to grow. What does the future look like for you, Maria?
Absolutely. I think if I'm not a chief customer officer somewhere in a technology company, the only other thing I think I would be doing is my fiance and I talk a lot about starting our own business. We aren't fully, like, nothing is flushed out. We haven't like,
nobody panic. Maria's not leaving.
We're not going anywhere. Yes. Thank you. But I think, 5-10 years down the road, hopefully not 10, then maybe I'm not ready to do it, but maybe 5 years down the road, if I have a really great idea that we could come together, I think both of us are professionals and we have this sort of calling of like, could we own something of our own and really impact the world that way? And how something that would impact people, empower people, and how could we do that? And I think that might be my future calling if customer success, leadership kind of, it maybe wouldn't be off the table, right? I may still need those leadership skills in owning my own business, right? Like I would still have customers.
Right. Well, I love that. Well, hopefully we stay in touch and I can watch your journey and see if in the next 5 years you guys go and launch something big. And very excited to see where that goes. So before we wrap up today, Maria, what's the one thing you want to leave our listeners with them today? Like some big takeaway, because you've obviously shared so much. I love your story. What's the one thing you're going to give them?
I want everyone on this listening to this call to stand a little taller, know your accomplishments, own them, and feel good about what you've done and the career that you've built and continue to build that, right? And don't forget, if you're having one of those days that you don't feel so confident, just stand in front of the mirror, do the Superwoman or Superman pose, right? Get that pose on and just tell yourself it's going to be a great day. I can do it.
I love that so much. I'm such a words of affirmation person. And I really do believe that if we say these things to ourselves, we will believe it, we will live it. So I think that's amazing advice to leave everyone with. Maria, I'm going to hit the Superwoman pose later. I have a big meeting. I will be doing that before that. That's great advice. I love that about your story. Thank you so much for your time. And thank you for sharing so much of your background and being vulnerable with our listeners. Really, really impressive story and journey, and just excited to continue to watch it.
Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate you asking me to be on here today. And I'm excited for everyone to hear the episode.
Excellent. Well, listen, if you enjoyed this episode, please rate and follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, subscribe on YouTube, and connect with me on LinkedIn. Until next time, we'll see you soon. Hi guys, I want to share a bit about an organization that I support called Wednesday Women. They're on a mission to increase the visibility of executive women leaders that you should know, learn from, and be inspired by. On LinkedIn, they share the profile of 2 amazing women each week, on Wednesdays of course. And now just imagine if we all followed, amplified, and nominated the women that we want to see more of. Their initiative provides examples of women CEOs, founders, sales executives, technical leaders, and so many more. By supporting Wednesday Women, you'll see more of these professionals in your social feeds, of course, but also on stages, podcasts, and panels. If you're interested in learning more and supporting their initiative, head over to www.wednesdaywomen.org or follow them on LinkedIn.